You built nothing, Mom smirked. As she signed my 49M solar battery patent over to my sister, my phone buzzed. Atlas Energy bid approved. Opening offer, $9 billion. I smiled. About that signature. The notebook was opened to page 12. Blue ink, college-ruled lines, a cathode layer sketch drawn 7 years ago in a dorm room that smelled like instant noodles and solder flux. In the margin, my father's handwriting. 2 words. This one. He wrote it the week before my engineering program started. What he meant did not become clear until 4 years later, when the cathode design solved a thermal storage problem that 3 research teams at 3 universities had failed to crack. Louis Kessler had been 4 years dead by then, and the marbled composition book was the only thing left of him that still carried his voice. The black and white marbled cover, college ruled, the first 30 pages filled with his son's sketches and his own annotations. Page 12 was the one that mattered. Louis saw it before anyone. Saturday morning, mid-January. My apartment desk. The cathode calculations were spread around the open page because Atlas Energy's CTO wanted a technical summary for next week's board meeting, and the summary needed figures that lived in my handwriting, not on a screen. A pot of coffee was half gone beside the laptop, cold enough that the surface had stopped steaming. The radiator under the window ticked and hissed the way old radiators do when the building's boiler cycles on and off at intervals nobody has fixed since the 70s. Outside, the parking lot was gray and wet, and the Corolla's windshield had a thin layer of frost on the driver's side. The apartment was the kind of one-bedroom place a 31-year-old electrochemical engineer rents when he earns $72,000 a year and puts $16,000 of his savings into patent filings instead of furniture. There was a desk, a bed, a kitchen counter, and a 2018 Corolla in the lot downstairs. Nadine had opinions about all of it. The phone buzzed. An automated LLC filing notification. Kessler Innovations, LLC. The email contained one attachment, a patent assignment form. Patent no. US 11842XXX. The cathode battery design, assigned from Kessler Innovations, LLC to Robin Kessler. Signature line, Nadine Kessler, LLC manager. Filed the previous day. Reading it took 15 seconds. Reading it again took longer, because the second time, every word meant something different. My sister Robin had never touched a soldering iron. She had never read a patent abstract, never sat through a 3-hour cathode deposition cycle, never spent a Saturday afternoon troubleshooting while a layer was delaminating at 400 degrees when the model said it should hold to 600. She worked in marketing for a medical device company, which meant she understood branding and quarterly reports and the art of talking about products she had not designed. She was 27 years old, and the closest she had come to the battery work was asking Nadine at a family dinner 2 Christmases ago whether the patent was worth anything yet. Nadine had added Robin to the LLC 3 years ago as a stakeholder, a move that required a single page of paperwork and 0 technical contribution. At the time, it felt like a formality, a mother wanting both children's names on the document. Looking at the assignment notification, it felt like the earliest stage of a plan that had taken 3 years to arrive at this Saturday morning. Page 12 stayed open on the desk. Louis's 2 words faced the ceiling. The coffee was cold. My laptop was on the kitchen counter. Pulling up the manufacturing process patent filing took about 10 seconds. Kessler Applied Energy, my company, filed 18 months earlier through Porter's laboratory facility. My name on the application. My personal bank account on every fee receipt. $16,000 of my own savings in filing costs, materials, and independent equipment rental. The manufacturing process patent was the one that transformed the cathode design from chemistry into commerce. Without it, the cathode sketch was exactly what Nadine believed it was, a drawing on a page, an academic exercise by a man who scribbled. With it, the drawing became a factory. Atlas Energy was not offering 9 figures for a drawing. They were offering 9 figures for the factory. Nadine did not know this patent existed as a separate filing. She did not understand patent architecture well enough to distinguish between a base composition patent and a process patent. To her, a battery patent was one line item, one signature block, $1 figure. She had heard 4.9 million in licensing inquiries and believed she had signed away something worth 4.9 million. What she had signed away was a cathode design worth approximately $200,000 in isolation. The manufacturing process that turned that design into something Atlas wanted to buy for $9 billion was in a different filing, in a different company, attached to a different bank account, and it had never been inside her LLC. The LLC still held the cathode patent, and until Atlas closed on the acquisition, that patent needed to remain connected to the larger IP portfolio. Dissolving my membership prematurely would have triggered an IP separation that could have introduced questions during Atlas's due diligence, questions about ownership chain, about whether the cathode design and the manufacturing process were properly linked, about whether the LLC structure created any latent claims on assets that had been filed independently. Atlas's legal team would have investigated those questions, and the investigation alone could have delayed the timeline by months. So for 3 years, the garage lab had stayed my workspace on paper. The LLC had stayed my corporate structure on paper, and Nadine had stayed the manager with signing authority over assets she believed she controlled entirely. The arrangement was strategic. The cost was swallowing the insults, the dismissals, the comparisons to Lewis as if he was a cautionary tale about wasted potential, and not the man who built the foundation for everything that was now worth 9 figures. The cost was listening to Nadine call his life's work scribbling, call his compositions worthless, and both of them worth nothing, while knowing that every word she said was wrong in a way she did not have the vocabulary to understand. Should have separated the IP 2 years ago when Dad died. That is clear now. The clarity arrived too late to prevent the transfer and just in time for everything else. If you have ever kept your name on something that was being stolen from you because leaving too early would have cost you more, subscribe to Karma Unfolded. This is what happened when the time finally came. Voss answered on the first ring. He had been my IP attorney for 2 years, retained through the same professional network that connected me to Porter and eventually to Atlas Energy. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Brief, factual, the kind of call between an attorney and a client who have worked together long enough that the context does not need explaining. Nadine transferred the cathode patent to Robin without notice, I said. Pull the LLC operating agreement. Section 4, near the bottom of page 7. My father wrote something into it that she has never read. He asked how certain I was about the clause. Very certain. Lewis did not write anything he did not mean, and he did not leave anything to chance. If he put it in the agreement, it was because he had spent time thinking about who would eventually need it and under what circumstances. Monday morning, the garage lock was new, a brass schlag where the old silver deadbolt used to sit. The key in my pocket, the one that had opened that door for 3 years of 16-hour weekends and Tuesday night sessions that ended past 2 a.m., went into the keyhole and stopped. It did not turn. It did not catch. The muscle memory in my hand was still expecting the bolt to slide and the door to give, and neither happened. The driveway smelled like motor oil and cold concrete. January air sat on my neck. Through the garage window, the fluorescent light was on, casting the same flat white glow it always cast. And through the glass I could see the workbench, the oscilloscope, the vacuum oven. All of it still there, still arranged the way I had left it before the trip. Everything visible, nothing reachable. Nadine had changed the lock after the patent assignment filed. She had waited for the paperwork to clear, and then she changed the bolt on the space where every cathode prototype, every failed layer, every thermal test, and every successful battery core had been built on a bench she believed was hers because her money bought it. Standing in the driveway with my hand on a lock someone else installed, the full architecture of what Nadine had done came into view. This was not impulse. This was a campaign with stages, and the locked door was the final one. The LLC had formed 3 years earlier. Nadine contributed $40,000 for equipment, bench supplies, and garage renovation. She had the space converted from a two-car garage into a functional lab, which meant upgraded electrical, a ventilation hood, and a workbench heavy enough to hold an oscilloscope and a vacuum oven. Robin was added to the operating agreement as a stakeholder despite having zero technical involvement, 0 hours in the lab, and zero understanding of what was being built inside those walls. My contribution was the work itself. 7 years of electrochemistry, the designs from page 12, the cathode composition that had attracted serious licensing interest, and every Saturday and Tuesday night spent on that bench turning Louis Kessler's margin note into a patent that a major energy company wanted to buy. That investment had purchased equipment and materials. In Nadine's mind, it had also purchased the right to call herself the manager of everything that happened inside the space the money touched. Every conversation about the LLC circled back to the same possessive: my garage, my investment, my equipment. The work that happened inside those walls was, to Nadine, an extension of her money. The way a landlord might describe a tenant's business as something that exists because the landlord provided the building. 3 weeks before the transfer, at her kitchen table, the speech she had been composing went public. Robin and Robin's husband were in the room. The table was cleared from a meal, plates stacked, the kitchen warm and closed with the smell of whatever Nadine had cooked that evening. Cedric had stopped by to pick up solvent and electrode blanks from the garage. Nadine was standing at the counter with a dish towel over one shoulder, and she delivered it with the cadence of a woman who has been thinking something for months and has decided the audience is ready. You sit in that garage and you scribble like your father used to scribble. He died a professor making $63,000 a year with nothing to show for 40 years of work. You are turning into him. At least Robin knows how to take an opportunity when it is in front of her. Robin studied her plate. Her husband studied the window. Neither of them spoke. The sentence hung in the kitchen the way statements do when everyone present recognizes they are hearing something rehearsed. My bag was on the chair beside me. The notebook was inside it. The man she was mocking, the one she had just reduced to a salary and a failure, had written 2 words on page 12 that would eventually be worth more than every insult she had ever composed at that counter. But saying so in that kitchen, in front of witnesses to a speech designed to build the family narrative for what was already in motion, would have given Nadine information she had not earned and time she did not deserve. So the supplies stayed behind. The drive home was quiet. The calendar said 3 weeks. Monday, with the new lock on the garage door, the drive went to Porter's facility instead. Porter was 38, an industry mentor who had offered bench space 18 months earlier when the manufacturing process outgrew the garage's capabilities. His facility was a converted warehouse on the east side of the city with proper ventilation, 3-phase power, and an electron microscope that cost more than my apartment building. He had introduced me to Atlas Energy's acquisitions team 9 months ago and was co-founder of Kessler Applied Energy. The deal existed because he had placed 2 phone calls to the right people at the right time, the same way Louis had placed 1 phone call to Porter before he died. His office door closed behind me. The room smelled like machine oil and thermal paste. The same way every lab space smells when equipment has been running for years in a room with no windows. Porter sat in his chair with his hands on the armrests and listened with the kind of patience that does not perform attention but simply holds it, absorbing the sequence of events without reacting to any single piece until the full picture is assembled. A clock on the wall behind him ticked through the entire explanation. 8 minutes. When it was finished, he did not say what most people would have said. He did not say, "I cannot believe she would do that," or "What are you going to do?" He turned to his laptop, opened a folder, and began scrolling. "Every access log from the day you started here," he said. 18 months of records. Every swipe in, every materials order, every prototype test report. Time-stamped and backed up on 3 servers. He turned the screen toward me so the log entries were visible, rows of dates and times running down the display in clean columns. She can say whatever she wants about that garage. The timestamps do not care what she says. His hands stayed on the keyboard for a moment. Then he turned the chair to face me directly. His expression was different from how it had been during the explanation, and the difference was that something behind it had been waiting for this conversation for a long time. "Your father called me 4 years ago," Porter said, "a month before he died. He asked me to keep an eye on you. He said you were going to build something real and that your mother was going to try to take credit for it." Porter paused. The office was quiet except for the ventilation system cycling. Those were his exact words. "She will try to take credit for it." He asked me to make sure there was a record. So, that is what I have been doing. Every log, every receipt, every test report. 4 years of it. Lewis had called Porter. Lewis, who spent 40 years in a university lab and never complained about it to anyone, who never raised his voice in any room, who never asked anyone for anything he could do for himself, had picked up the phone a month before he died and called a man he barely knew and asked him to protect his son's work. He did not tell me. He did not leave a note. He did not write it in any margin beside any annotation. He simply placed the call, said the words, and trusted that when the moment arrived, the right person would remember what had been asked and what the record was for. The office was quiet for a while after that. Porter turned back to his laptop and began printing the access logs, page by page. 18 months of time-stamped entries accumulating in the printer tray. Neither of us spoke about what Lewis had said for the rest of the afternoon, because there was nothing to add to it that would make it mean more than it already did. Tuesday. Voss called with a different kind of energy in his voice. The LC operating agreement was 12 pages. Lewis had drafted it himself, which Nadine had allowed because hiring an attorney would have cost money she did not want to spend, and because she believed that a chemistry professor could not possibly understand corporate governance well enough to write anything that mattered. She had signed it, Robin had signed it, Cedric had signed it, and it went into a drawer. 3 years later, none of them had read it since, except Voss, who read it on a Tuesday morning and called me within the hour. Section 4.3, page 7, third paragraph. Lewis's language, precise and academic, the kind of sentence that does not waste a word and does not leave a gap. Intellectual property developed by any member using personal funds and outside LLC facilities shall remain the sole property of the developing member. Lewis wrote that clause before the manufacturing process existed, before the separate patent filing, before Porter's lab, before Atlas Energy, before any of it. He wrote it during the LLC's formation, sitting at the same kitchen table where Nadine would later stand with a dish towel over her shoulder and call his life's work scribbling. He wrote it because 35 years of marriage had taught him what Nadine's investment would eventually mean in her mind, and he built a wall around his son's future work while his son was still building it. Voss read me the clause over the phone, each word arriving separately, the way Lewis would have delivered a lecture. Then he read it again, slower, the second time through, sitting at my desk with the radiator ticking beside me and the cold coffee still on the counter. It became clear that Lewis had anticipated exactly this scenario. He had written Section 4.3 not as a precaution, but as a certainty, the way an engineer designs around a known failure mode. He knew Nadine would try to claim the output. He made certain, on paper, in the LLC's founding document, that the claim would fail. Reading that clause felt like hearing Lewis speak, not the voice from the kitchen table or the university hallway, the voice from the margin of page 12, the one that looked at something and understood what it was going to become before anyone else in the room. If someone you lost left you more protection than you realized at the time, subscribe to Karma Unfolded and stay with this story. The clause was only the beginning. 2 days later, Voss called again. This time, he did not start with a greeting. "We have a problem," he said. "Whitfield filed a provisional claim on your manufacturing patent 3 days before the transfer. He is arguing the manufacturing process is derived from LLC-funded research." The room went cold. The manufacturing patent was filed from Porter's lab. My money. My company. I know that. Whitfield does not. Or, he did not when he filed it. The claim went in before the transfer cleared, which means this was not a reaction. This was part of the plan. She was reaching for both patents. What does this do to Atlas? Their due diligence window is 30 days. An active IP claim against the centerpiece of the acquisition introduces title risk. Atlas does not build factories around uncertainty. They build them around certainty. If this claim is still active when their legal team runs the audit, they will flag it. Best case, the timeline stretches. Worst case, they walk. Atlas's annual revenue exceeded $40 billion. The battery storage market was worth 9 times that. A $9 billion acquisition could die because one attorney filed one claim built on his client's misrepresentation of where the work was done. How do we kill it? I said. Evidence. Every piece of it. Lab access records, bank statements, your lease, the filing receipt. Anything that proves the manufacturing work never touched the LLC. Porter pulled the logs within an hour of my call. 18 months of electronic swipe records organized by date, every entry and exit timestamped to the minute. Materials receipts from 3 chemical supply companies, all billed to my personal bank account, shipped to Porter's facility, not the Ellis garage. Prototype test reports logged under my credentials with batch numbers matching the patent filing exactly. My bank statements confirmed the $16,000 in fees and materials. My apartment lease confirmed my address for 4 years, separate from the garage. The independent filing receipt showed Kessler Applied Energy, my routing number, my signature. Every document pointed to one facility, one account, one person. None of it was the LLC. Voss assembled the response over 2 days and sent the complete package to Whitfield on Friday, Section 4. 3. Porter's logs, the bank records, the lease, the filing receipt. 10 business days to withdraw or face sanctions. And then Voss found the timeline detail that changed the shape of everything. Whitfield's billing records, disclosed as part of the provisional claim documentation, showed that Nadine had first consulted him 4 months earlier, in September. She had asked him to assess the cathode patent's commercial value. She had learned the real number, the one that made her eyes change. The consultation predated the kitchen speech by 3 months. The brutal line about scribbling and Lewis's salary and Robin knowing how to take an opportunity had not been frustration spilling out at a family gathering. It had been narrative construction. Nadine was building the justification for a theft she had already put into motion. 4 months of planning behind a 3-week-old insult. The following week moved in a clean line. Saturday morning, Voss filed a formal objection to the patent assignment through the patent office. The basis was Section 3.1 of the operating agreement, another clause Lewis had drafted. Any transfer of LLC assets required 30 days of written notice to all members before execution. Nadine had provided 0 notice. No email. No letter. No text. No voicemail. She signed the assignment, filed it, and changed the garage locks inside the same 72-hour window. The assignment was procedurally defective under its own governing document, independent of every other issue, which meant that even if Section 4.3 had not existed, even if the manufacturing patent had been inside the LLC, the transfer would still be challengeable because Nadine had not followed the rules her dead husband wrote into the agreement she never read. Sunday, Voss mailed the demand letter to Nadine's home address by certified mail. Return of the full investment plus damages for the unauthorized asset transfer. The demand was not about recovering the money. It was about pulling the foundation out from under every claim Nadine had ever made about the garage, the equipment, and the work. Tuesday, Voss confirmed the Whitfield consultation timeline from the billing records disclosed during the provisional claim process. September, 4 months before the kitchen speech, 4 months before the patent transfer. Nadine had walked into Whitfield's office in September, before the leaves had finished turning, and asked him to assess the value of a cathode patent her son had developed. She learned the number. She learned that licensing inquiries of that magnitude meant the patent was a genuine asset, not an academic exercise. And then she went home. and she spent 3 months building the architecture for the transfer. She added Robin to the signing paperwork. She consulted with Whitfield about the provisional claim on the manufacturing patent. She prepared the family narrative, the kitchen's speech about scribbling and Lewis's salary, delivered in front of Robin and Robin's husband as witnesses, so that when the transfer came through there would be a public record of her reasoning. The brutal line had not been frustration. The kitchen table had not been a family dinner that went sideways. It had been a planned event, scheduled and scripted by a woman who understood that the best way to take something is to first convince the room that it was never worth having. Thursday, Whitfield called Voss. Voss put it on speaker in his office while I sat across the desk. "I am reviewing my position," Whitfield said. His voice had the careful tone of a man choosing every word. Voss did not let the silence sit. "Your provisional claim cites LLC-funded research. Section 4.3 of the operating agreement your client signed says otherwise. 18 months of facility access logs say otherwise. The filing receipt, the bank statements, and the lease all say otherwise. My client represented to me that the work was conducted at the LLC facility. Your client was wrong. Or your client was lying. Either way, your name is on a filing that has no factual basis, and you have 10 days. Whitfield was quiet for 3 seconds. "I will be in touch," he said. The line went dead. Voss looked at me across the desk. He is going to withdraw. He just does not want to admit it on a recorded call. Friday evening, Nadine sent a meeting invitation by email. Tuesday, 10 a.m., her dining room. Subject line, finalizing the transition. She wanted to hand Robin the patent documentation in person. She wanted the ceremony of a completed transaction, the moment where the family acknowledged that the asset had changed hands and the conversation was finished and the new arrangement was permanent. The invitation arrived. The laptop closed. Porter picked up his phone on the second ring. "She set a meeting for Tuesday morning," I said. "Wants to finalize the transition. Bring the full file. Logs, receipts, the operating agreement, everything." Porter asked what time. 10, I told him. He said he would be there. Nadine's dining room table had been cleared and set for the occasion, a tablecloth that only came out for holidays. The room smelled like brewed coffee and Nadine's perfume, the same floral scent she wore to church and to family photographs and to any event she considered a performance. Whitfield's leather folder sat at one end beside a stack of assignment paperwork and a pen with a heavy cap. Robin was in the chair to his left, wearing a blouse she had clearly selected for the moment, the kind of clothing decision that suggests a person believes something significant is about to be handed to them. Nadine sat at the head of the table with her reading glasses on and her coffee cup centered on a coaster, composed and still, like a woman who has been waiting for this morning for 4 months. When Porter and Voss walked in behind me, the arrangement of Nadine's face changed. She had prepared for her son and his quiet resignation. She had not prepared for his IP attorney and his co-founder walking in with a briefcase and a laptop bag. "This is a family matter," Nadine said. "It became a legal matter when you filed a patent assignment without notice to an LLC member," Voss said. He set his briefcase on the table and sat down without waiting for an invitation. Nadine watched him for a moment. Then she turned to the paperwork, pushed it toward Robin, and signed the final page with a deliberate hand. She signed it slowly, the way people sign things when they want the act of signing to be the statement. She set the pen on the table and looked directly at me. "This is done," she said. "The patent belongs to Robin now. If you want to fight it, take it to court." She folded her hands on the table. "You built nothing. Your father built nothing. At least this way, something comes of it." Almost said it right then. Almost told her the number. Almost said, "The man you are mocking, the one who built nothing, wrote 2 words on page 12 that are about to be worth $9 billion, and you are sitting across the table from his son holding a piece of paper worth 4% of what you think it is." Almost let the number land in the room before the argument was ready for it. But Nadine did not need to understand. She needed to sign. She had already signed. Everything after that was delivery. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. The screen showed a notification from Atlas Energy's general counsel. Board vote complete. Opening offer confirmed, $9 billion. The call was available at my convenience. Atlas Energy's annual revenue exceeded $40 billion. The battery storage market was worth 9 times that. The number on the screen was real. The phone went face down on the table. About that signature. The bag came off my shoulder. The notebook went onto the table beside the assignment paperwork. Page 12, open, Lewis's blue ink in the margin. This is where the cathode design was born, I said. Before the LLC. Before your $40,000. Before Robin was added to an agreement she has never read. Dad wrote 2 words next to this design because he saw what it was going to become before anyone else. Nadine looked at the marbled cover, then at the open page. Her expression did not change immediately because she did not understand why it was on the table or what it was supposed to prove. What does a composition book prove? The cathode patent you just signed to Robin is the base design. The composition. On its own, in the licensing market, it is worth about $200,000. The manufacturing process that makes it commercially viable, the one Atlas Energy wants to build a factory around, is a separate patent, filed independently through my company. My name, my money. Porter's lab. Not one piece of it is inside the LLC. Robin's head turned from the paperwork to me, then to Nadine, then back to the paperwork as if the numbers on the page had changed in the time it took her to look away. Nadine said, "That is not true. Everything was built in my garage, with my equipment, using my." Voss opened his briefcase. Section 4.3 of the LLC operating agreement, drafted by Louis Kessler. He pulled a copy of the agreement from the briefcase and placed it on the table, open to page 7, the clause underlined. He read it aloud, each word placed the way Louis would have placed it. Mr. Whitfield, your provisional claim has no standing under the LLC's own governance documents. Whitfield was already looking at the clause. He read it once, and then he looked at Nadine. You told me the manufacturing work was done in the LLC garage. Nadine, it was. He used my space, my electricity. The manufacturing process was developed at my facility, Porter said. His voice was even, unhurried, factual, 18 months of access logs, materials receipts, and prototype test reports. Time-stamped and backed up. None of it touches the LLC address. Not one entry. Nadine opened her mouth and then closed it. She looked at Porter as if seeing him clearly for the first time, which in a way she was, because she had never understood what he was in her son's professional life or what the lab he provided actually meant. The room went still. Whitfield's hands moved from the agreement on the table to his own briefcase. He opened it and began putting documents into it, methodically, without making eye contact with anyone at the table. The sound of papers sliding against leather was the only sound for several seconds. Robin said, "You told me it was worth almost $5 million. She was looking at Nadine, and her voice had the quality of someone who has just realized that the person giving them a gift was not being generous, but was using them as a vehicle. You told me he was on board with the transfer. You said he agreed." Nadine started. He should have agreed. That garage was built with my. You called it scribbling, I said. Dad put a clause in that agreement you never read. The patent you signed away cannot run without mine. Nadine stopped. Her mouth held its shape for a beat and then closed. The room stayed quiet long enough for the sentence to finish arriving. I am dissolving my membership in the LLC, I said. Voss files the withdrawal paperwork Monday. You can keep the cathode patent. Robin can keep the assignment. Good luck licensing it without the manufacturing process. Nadine's hand went to the stack of papers she had just signed. Her fingers pressed into the top page without lifting it, as if the signature could be held in place by physical pressure. Her jaw set hard. She looked at Whitfield. He was closing his briefcase, and he did not return her look. She lowered herself into the chair slowly, like the seat had shifted under her by an inch, and her free hand went flat against the table to hold herself steady. Her breathing went shallow. Whitfield stood and closed the last clasp. Mrs. Kessler, we need to speak privately about my continued involvement in this matter. His voice carried the tone of a man who has just realized he needs to leave a room before his name gets attached to what happened in it. Robin looked at the assignment paperwork one more time, then at Nadine. Mom, what did you do? Nadine said nothing. Her hand stayed on the signed page. Porter leaned back in his chair, folded his arms across his chest, and watched. 2 days later, Nadine called. Her voice on the phone had a quality it did not usually carry, something between desperation and the kind of aggression that surfaces when a person has run out of moves and reaches for a threat they cannot execute. She had spent 60 years believing that volume was leverage, and the belief had not updated. If you do not drop this, she said, I will call Atlas Energy myself. Every piece of what you built is stolen research. They will walk away from the deal and you will have nothing. The call lasted 45 seconds. No response was given. 20 minutes later, Voss sent Nadine an email with 3 attachments. The LLC operating agreement with Section 4. 3 highlighted in yellow, the independent filing documentation showing dates and funding sources, and Porter's complete lab access records with 18 months of timestamps. Subject line. For your review, before any further communications. Nadine did not call again. The email was not opened for 2 days, according to the read receipt. When it was opened at 3 in the morning. Robin sat at her kitchen table 2 days later, with the patent assignment spread out in front of her and a cup of coffee she had not touched. She had called a patent broker the afternoon after the confrontation. The same afternoon she drove home and told her husband what had happened in the dining room, and watched his face change as he understood the shape of what Nadine had done and the role Robin had played in it without knowing. The broker's assessment came back in writing within 48 hours. The cathode patent alone, without the manufacturing process, carried a licensing potential of $150,000 to $200,000, not $4.9 million. The number was not close. It was not in the same range. The patent Nadine had signed to Robin was worth approximately 4% of what Nadine had promised. Robin also learned she might owe capital gains tax on the assessed transfer value. Because the gift had been recorded at the higher valuation, the one Nadine believed was accurate, and the tax obligation followed the recording. Robin picked up the phone and called Nadine. You told me it was worth $5 million, she said. Nadine started to answer. It was, she said, before he. She did not finish the sentence. The silence sat there until Robin ended the call. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Whitfield mailed Nadine a letter on firm letterhead formally withdrawing his representation. The letter cited material misrepresentations regarding the scope and location of research activities. He did not call first. He did not offer a meeting. The letter arrived by certified mail, the same delivery method Voss had used for the demand letter, and Nadine opened it at her kitchen table. Word reached Robin's husband's family within the week. Nadine stopped hosting Sunday dinners. The invitations simply stopped arriving, and nobody called to ask why, because the people who would have called already knew the answer. 3 weeks after the confrontation, on a Saturday morning, Nadine walked into the garage. The workbench was bare. The oscilloscope that had sat on the left end for 3 years was gone. The battery prototypes, the ones in various stages of assembly that used to line the shelf above the workbench, were gone. The solvent rack was empty. The electrode blanks were gone. The vacuum oven, the thermal chamber, the calibration tools, all of it had been removed, packed, and transported to Porter's facility the previous weekend. The extension cords were coiled and hung on their original hooks, the way the space had looked before Lewis converted it into a lab 15 years earlier, back when it was just a garage with a concrete floor and a fluorescent light that buzzed. The fluorescent light still buzzed. She had paid for it. The outlet strips were still screwed into the walls. She had paid for those too. Everything she had paid for was still there. Everything that had been built with it was gone. The marbled composition book was not there. It had never belonged to her. It had never been in the LLC's asset register. It had been Lewis's, and then it had been mine. And now it sat open on a desk, in a different building, in a different part of the city. Turned to page 12, where it would stay. She stood in the empty garage for a long time. The fluorescent light hummed above her. The floor was clean. The air smelled like nothing, because the chemicals and the solder and the thermal paste that had given the space its character for 3 years were gone, and what was left was concrete and drywall and the evidence of what used to be. On her dining room table, the signed patent assignment sat under a coffee mug, filed and notarized and delivered, worth 1/20th of what she believed she was taking. At my desk in the new office, the notebook is open to page 12. Lewis's handwriting in the margin, blue ink on college-ruled paper. This one. Morning light comes through the window and lands on the page in a way that makes the blue ink look nearly black, the way fresh ink looks before it dries. The office is quiet. The phone beside me has 3 voicemails from Atlas Energy's chief technology officer, and none of them have been played yet, because there is no rush. The deal will be there this afternoon, and tomorrow, and next week. My thumb moves along the edge of page 12, slow and deliberate, the way Lewis used to trace a formula with his finger when the calculation resolved, as if he was reading it one more time to make sure it knew he was there. He wrote 2 words on this page 20 years before they mattered. He wrote a clause on page 7 of a 12-page document that nobody read until it saved his son's work. He called a man he barely knew and asked him to keep a record. He did all of this quietly, without telling anyone, the way he did everything. And then he died making $63,000 a year with nothing to show for it. That is what Nadine said. Nothing to show for it. If your father left you something no one else understood until it saved you, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Karma Unfolded. We will be here.